yeah, anyways, as HUD-8 shareholders, are you guys concerned? What do you guys think about the short report?
Can I chime in first?
Yes.
To be frank, I didn't read it, but I do have common sense. Let me keep going.
You long didn't read.
Did not look at it at all.
That's the best way to deal with investor.
Not even gonna hide
short
it.
reports. You just don't read the report.
But like, think about it for a sec. Even if I didn't read it, I'm just gonna use like straight up common sense here.
To begin, welcome everyone to the Zillennial Money Podcast. So let's start with some intros. So some of you guys might already know me. My name's Andy. I'm from Andy's Fire Club. So be sure to check out my other channel if you guys haven't already. But yeah, we're just three random Canadians. We're going to talk about crypto. We're going to talk about stocks. We're going to talk about politics and news, which might be slightly controversial, but we'll do it anyways because we're not scared and we're not pussies. Anyways, so yeah, why don't we start with a brief intro? I already kind of introduced myself, but I don't think anyone in our audience has met either of you, Dom and Tristan. So why don't one of you start?
I can start first if you want.
Okay.
Okay, so hey everyone, my name is Dominic, and like Andy, I also do post YouTube videos too as well. So if you'd like to like, comment, and subscribe to that, it's Dominic Hong plugin. So definitely check that out if you do have a chance. Me and Andy are childhood friends. I've known each other for a while and got introduced to Tristan, and that's why we're here now. And we're ready to talk about the subject topics that Andy just mentioned, and we're ready to go.
All right, now I'll jump in here. I'm Tristan. I am from the Tristan Tries channel, which is very active currently, very active. And I've known Andy and such for several years now. And Dominic, as mentioned, I met a little bit later. And I'm also having issues with my camera, so...
No worries, we'll get that figured out. Okay, so without any further delay, let's jump into today's docket because we got kind of a full slate of things to talk about today. So number one, I said we were going to talk about politics. We're three random Canadians. We're going to start with an American politics topic because we can. Okay, so number one, Trump landslide win in Iowa Caucus. So for those of you who don't know, the United States is having an election in 2024. And although we're based here in Canada, whatever the United States does affects us deeply as well. And I think that this is something that the whole world is paying attention to. And the election is supposed to be in November. However, before the election goes to the general election between the Republican candidate and the Democratic candidate, they need to each select a nominee. And the nomination process for the Republican Party is currently contested somewhat, but we do have a clear frontrunner, being the former president, Donald J. Trump. And I'm sure everybody knows who he is already. So the first election, it's called a caucus. So for those of you who don't know what the difference between a caucus and a primary is, and a caucus is basically when it's sort of an election, but instead of voting with like a piece of paper, everybody gets into like a big gymnasium or a big room, and then you kind of vote with your feet. So you stand in a corner with people who support the same candidate, and then you would count how many people stand in that corner. And then there's opportunities for you to kind of switch sides as well. As the night progresses, and then they do like round after round. And yeah, that's basically what a caucus is. And Iowa is the first state to have a caucus. And then after Iowa, New Hampshire is the first state to have a primary, which is a regular kind of voting process. So we just had the Iowa caucus. We have not had the New Hampshire primary yet as of this recording, but that will happen this upcoming Tuesday, which is the 23rd of January, 2024. So we'll see how that goes. But Iowa just happened, and Donald Trump ended up winning 51% of the vote with over 56,000 votes. Iowa's not a very big place, so 56,000 is already over 50% of the vote. There's 99 counties in Iowa, and he won 98 out of 99 counties, with the county that he didn't win going to Nikki Haley, who won by 1 vote over Donald Trump. So don't let anyone tell you that voting doesn't count, because sometimes 1 vote can make all the difference. So 1 vote denied Trump a clean sweep of the entire state. But still, it's a massive win for Donald Trump. And as a result, Vivek Ramaswamy, one of the candidates on the Republican side, who's a favorite among Twitter users and just on the internet in general, he dropped out of the race after a disappointing result in Iowa, and he endorsed Donald Trump. And actually, on that note, earlier today, we also got the news that Ron DeSantis has also dropped out of the race for the presidency for the Republican nomination. So right now, the Republican field is whittled down to only 2, which is Donald Trump himself versus Nikki Haley, who's the former ambassador of the United States to the UN and the former South Carolina governor. So we'll see how she performs in New Hampshire this upcoming Tuesday. But yeah, what are your thoughts on all of this? I've spoken a lot, but somebody feel free to chime in here.
No worries. If you want, I can go first.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I just want to preface by saying, like, I don't know too much about politics, but one thing I do know is that just looking at the chart here, I can kind of see that blue might be getting a little expensive, although I am a progressive thinker, and I do think a lot of the progressive thoughts are very, like, positive, in my opinion. I totally support that, but at the same time, it can be a little expensive. So I see why I guess the appropriate switch happens every single year to red to blue and blue to red. I think this is probably the only way for the American or Canadian system to work properly, because there's always going to be a problem one way or the other way. But I do support a more progressive mindset, but I see why this is happening at the same time. So that's my point of thought for all this.
All right. Tristan, what do you have to say? What do you think?
Donnie's back. I definitely think that it's going to become down to Donald Trump and potentially Biden. I'm not sure who the Democrats are leaning towards currently, but I think it's going to be a round 2 at the current rate. It's looking like a round 2 between old Donald Trump and older Biden. So we're going to see the battle of the ages between the oldies, trying to convince us that they have something to offer on this front. So I'm not overly surprised that Donald is leading because of the fact that he has a pretty strong support base there. And to be frank, I haven't heard of most of the other people, like, in detail. So just based on the amount of information we're getting up here, I feel like the fact that we know about Donald, obviously he was the president beforehand, but just the general awareness is going to result in him getting a lot more attention, and thus become the most likely candidate for the next election with Republicans.
Right. Yeah. So now I have a question for y'all. So I think on this podcast, we're all kind of centrist, maybe slightly left leaning. Although, like, okay, so number one is am I like out of line by saying that we're not particularly excited about either Trump or Biden? Like, I know like people here are probably not too big of a fan of Trump, but you know, I think maybe I would be speaking for all of us by saying we're not particularly excited about Biden's performance as president, and we're not particularly looking forward to another potential 4 years of Biden, even if he wins, right?
Can I just add on to say, honestly, we just like stonks. That's what it is. So if, like
So
as much as
yeah, no, so you're like, I don't care who's president. It's just like make the stock market go up, and
yeah,
it's,
I mean, like to add like one thing, the one thing I did notice is when Trump, although we may not believe in everything he does, the stock market was performing a little better versus when Biden came in. There seemed to be a sudden change. So I'll leave it at that. Gonna leave it.
Yeah, and I know like a lot of people have like, you know, issues with that statement by saying like, you know, it just so happens that Biden came in when the Fed was raising rates, and like it's not obviously like we don't want to say that it's fully Trump's like credit that the stock market was up when he was president, and you know, it's not Biden's fault fully that the stock market is down when he was president, but it's just, you know, it is an interesting correlation, right? So, Tristan, do you think that that has anything to do with it? Like, who's president has anything to do with the stock market, or do you think it's just a coincidence? Then, like, Biden just got unlucky, or Trump just got lucky, or something?
I think that the impact is limited, but I think that there is some impact. Obviously, if there is a president who is more inclined to raise rates or less inclined to raise rates, that will have an impact on the stock market performance. But you know, there are other items that are going to be affecting that performance. It's going to be a multivariate problem, so it's not going to be just Biden bad because stock market bad, Trump good because stock market good. It's not going to be that simple, but there is going to be some impact to some degree. Just
Right.
how much?
Yeah. Okay. So now's the second question. So I know like all of us hold Canadian citizenship, and I don't think any of us here holds American citizenship. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Not
But
currently.
Assuming that you could vote in the American election, who would you vote for?
Oh man, no comment.
Do you want to vote for the decrepit or the decrepit? You know,
So you don't have to choose between Biden and Trump, right? That's kind of like I left it open on purpose. Is that I'm not making you choose between Biden and Trump. I'm saying that out of all the candidates that you've seen or that you've heard of, or maybe even you can even name someone who's not running, right? Like I've seen people who says that, you know, The Rock, like Dwayne The Rock Johnson would make a great president, right? They will vote for The Rock. So like if you think that he would make a good president, even though he's not running, like you know, feel free to toss that name out. But yeah, if you had the choice, who would you vote for?
Well, it's like, would you vote for a forest fire or would you vote for a dynamite explosion? Like, either way, I don't know.
Just vote for Mr. Beast.
Yeah, honestly, I think like this is the state of American politics where I think like if you just plucked a random like YouTuber from YouTube and made him president, it'll be better than like the choices that we have, right? Okay, so maybe that question is too hard. Maybe like let me modify that question a little bit.
Yeah.
You gotta tone it down a little.
Is too big, right? So okay, so out of all the candidates on the Republican side, and I know that you guys aren't Republicans, but if you had to choose someone that was a Republican, who would you choose?
You can go first.
I was just gonna say, you got a list somewhere? Because as I said, Donald Trump's winning the in a sense because he is the one that we remember. and I clearly don't remember anyone else.
In fairness, too, as well, we are Canadian after all, so
Yeah. Okay, so maybe you guys don't pay attention to the U.S. politics as much as I do, but so I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I really think Vivek Ramaswamy ran a really good campaign. Like, obviously, I don't agree with everything that he's said. Like, particularly, I don't agree with his stance on climate change, where he kind of just chalks it up to like climate hysteria, which I think is not true. Like, it is a real big problem that we're facing. But besides that, I think a lot of the other things that he said are, I think it really hits a chord. It's like right now in America, you have all these career politicians, the military industrial complex, as some people would call it, that's kind of like in control, and the establishment is in control. And no matter if you're Republican or Democrat, once you get into office, you run up the deficit, and you give people handouts, and it drives up inflation. And in the end, it's just the everyday American that suffers, right? So one of the things that he proposed was that he's going to slash the size of government, or like federal employees, like by half. By like, if your social security number ends in an odd number, you're fired, or something like that. Literally just get rid of half of the federal workers. Which I don't know about that ideology, about that method in particular, but I do think that, throughout COVID, the size of the government has blown up. And if you look at the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, many of the jobs that were added, that supposedly is evidence that the American economy is doing well, many of the jobs that were added are government jobs, which we can have like a whole episode of this podcast debating about how efficient government workers are. Hint, they're not very efficient. But I won't bore you guys with all of that. But yeah, essentially that's kind of my opinion. I probably would have voted for Vivek if I could vote and if I was a Republican. But again, like I consider myself a centrist, so there's potential for both a Democrat and a Republican to win me over. But yeah, that's just my opinion.
no comment for now.
You're going Switzerland on this one, eh?
I'm going Peace is my name. And my name is Peace.
I don't have a particular alternative Republican candidate in mind. Not that I would lean towards Trump, but I just don't know enough about the other candidates to throw my lot in with any of them.
Right. Okay. Well,
not that I'd probably vote for the Republicans in general, but
yeah. We'll see how the thing shakes out and the rest of the primaries and stuff. And maybe next time we'll talk about Canadian politics because I know a lot of our viewers are probably going to be Americans, so maybe they would be interested in listening to a little bit of Canadian politics in the future as well, because that's not something that a lot of people know a lot about. So I feel like there's potential value add there in the future. But yeah, anyways, okay, let's move on to the second topic if everyone's done with their expressing their opinions on the Trump thing. So the second thing that we're going to talk about tonight is the huge winter storm that we just had, that has been sweeping all across central and western Canada and the Midwestern United States, and has now moved to actually the East United States, like Eastern United States as well. But yeah, I think you two both live in Calgary, Alberta. I live in Ontario, so I had the pleasure of avoiding the worst of that winter storm that just passed. But yeah, I know you guys in Calgary got hit with negative 40 degrees Celsius weather. And actually negative 40 degrees is the same in Celsius and Fahrenheit. So I don't have to convert the temperature there. So negative 40 degrees Celsius and Fahrenheit, which is
quite warm.
Pretty cold. Oh, it's certain things is warm. Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently it's not cold enough. Yeah. So there's in particular, I don't. I just wanted to touch upon two topics in particular about the winter storm, which is number one. I think it goes to underscore kind of the housing crisis that's happening here in Canada, and I was curious to hear what you guys think about it because there was a recent report on BNN Bloomberg, which is kind of a Canadian version of Bloomberg, I guess, where they put out this report saying that the average house price in Canada has hit 750,000 Canadian dollars, and the average price of a home in Toronto and Vancouver are both over 1 million Canadian dollars. So the average, and the average household income of around just under 80,000 Canadian dollars per household, you can only afford a $315,000 home with a max insured mortgage of $300,000. So that's kind of the gravity of the situation in terms of our housing crisis. And the reason why it's related to the winter storm is that unfortunately, we also, because of this housing crisis, homelessness is becoming a huge problem. And unfortunately, if you're stuck outside when it's -40, that could be deadly. So I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on the housing crisis. How bad do you think it is? Is it being sensationalized or is it actually really bad? And if it is actually really bad, do you have any ideas on how we as a country can fix this issue? Because I think this is particularly an issue in Canada, but I think folks in the United States can kind of sympathize with this as well because it's a problem to a lesser extent in the United States. But here in Canada, I really do think it's really bad. But what do you guys think?
Me or you first, gosh.
All right. Well, the housing crisis. Oh, one of my favorite topics. It's a hot mess in Canada. There's basically no way that the average person can afford a house in one of the two major cities, like the most desirable, like Toronto and Vancouver. There's basically no way that the average person can afford that on an average salary. You have to be making an absurd amount of money over the average to be able to afford it, right? Which is a serious problem because most people they want to be able to build their wealth somehow, and one of the best ways to do that is through real estate. And if you can never get the opportunity to own real estate, you have no opportunity to build wealth, especially when the inflation rate is calling the value of your dollar down, so that even when you're working and producing money, the value of that money is dropping. So it's very difficult because the way I see it is you can't really stay in these major cities because of the fact that the cost of living has risen too much, and that's also a disadvantage for those places because they'll be pricing out a lot of their younger and productive members of society. So, and then at the same time, obviously we're having the increase in the homeless population because people are just getting priced out of everything, So it's a giant mess.
Yeah. So do you have any ideas how we could go about fixing it, right? Because let's say if you were the Prime Minister of Canada, what would you do? Do you have some policies in mind that you think that could help?
I think I know where this is going. I guess we have to build more houses. I think there's a few things that are going on. So I hope this isn't cancel or or whatever anyway. But I think a lot of international students from abroad are coming into Canada and they're trying to go here for school and just working and things like this. But I think the huge issue is that there's not enough houses to facilitate for all these different people. So I feel like that contributes to why everything's becoming so expensive. Obviously, there's other specific reasons too. But if you're in Toronto and Vancouver, there's no way that you'll be able to afford a house if you're in our age demographic group. It's just impossible unless you're making a substantial amount, which is kind of why we're here in Calgary. But even in Calgary too, it's getting pretty expensive. I'm sure Tristan knows this pretty well.
Yeah.
In your Calgary-
For those of audience members that don't know, both Dominic and Tristan are also originally from Ontario.
Right. Yes.
So
very
yeah,
expensive.
I think I would venture a guess as to say that the like more affordable housing in Calgary is a large part of the reason why you guys decided to move there.
It was very convincing. The fact that you could that it went from being the options was basically never buy a house in Ontario or buy a house in Calgary.
I mean,
When the calculus is that, I mean, it really makes the decision a lot easier.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, go ahead.
What do you guys think? Like policies again? Let's go back to policies. Like, if you were prime minister, what would you do? Like, how do we dig ourselves out of this hole?
I feel
So there's definitely a demand and a supply side of this. From the supply side, we clearly have too few houses for the number of people that want to live, obviously. And there are ways for the government to try and mitigate that through, introduction of public, enforcing or not enforcing necessarily, but encouraging the growth of like more affordable housing and also like more like condos and stuff, like more not necessarily condos, but like more packed in people. I'm blanking on what the term.
Multi-family units. And stuff
Yeah,
like
that's what I'm getting at. Encouraging the development of those over single family homes. So doing repurposing the tax, like the areas into more multi-factor, multivariable places. So I think that would also help. And then from a demand side, well, there are ways to reduce the demand. Having our immigration at all-time highs is not going to help the demand, because obviously the more people that come in, they need houses. We need houses. People are already here. They need a house. The immigrants, they need a house. So you're going to be running into a scenario where there's already not enough houses, and we're having more people come in to a place that has no houses.
Exactly.
So it's difficult, because it's like some of the arguments that I've heard for this is that the immigrants will help build the houses, or to something to that effect, like that they're a net gain for our society, which they are, but we're not necessarily, the way our immigration system works, it doesn't encourage the people who will have the skills to build the houses. It encourages much higher education, who are not going to want to build the houses. So it's a lot of people who are not going to be able to assist with that supply side issue.
Yeah, so you're essentially saying we're letting in too many consultants. Not enough
construction workers.
Yeah. I wouldn't say necessarily consultants, but we're letting in a lot of people like doctors, and then not letting them practice as doctors, and then they can't practice as doctors, but they still don't want to be construction workers.
Yeah, and we just have a whole bunch of former doctors working at Tim Hortons, and that's the issue.
I mean, we have a health problem, like a healthcare problem too. We don't have enough doctors at the same time, so maybe there should be doctors.
That's a good point, because I was talking to one of my friends earlier, and he's like Egyptian, so he's like his family's from Egypt, and his dad is a doctor, but his dad's like certification. He went to school in Egypt and all that stuff, and they don't recognize that certification when he immigrated to Canada. So it's like, he had to go through schooling again, even though he's been in the practice for like decades before he came to Canada. And even after he finished his schooling, apparently they like put him to like just regular residency when he was actually a surgeon back in Egypt. So it's like they they didn't allow him to practice his specialty, even though he finished school and even though he finished school in Egypt, and they made him redo some programs in Canada, and even then he couldn't practice as a surgeon.
Well, it's like, why are we encouraging people like surgeons to move to Canada and then going, just kidding, your credentials aren't good enough for us? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like, why wouldn't, if we're going to be encouraging them, why are we not accepting at least some of the credentials? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. So Dom, what do you think?
Oh, like in general? Yeah, no, it's a whole hiccup. You can argue that maybe we should pause on immigration just a little bit, because I think what it is the government needs to take care of us before we can take care of others, because I think the surplus of supply and demand is just nuts. Hopefully we can find a way to take care of us, and yeah, it's really complicated. That's all I'll say for now.
Yeah, and I hate how this topic has become somewhat polarized in kind of Canadian society today. So for those of you who aren't Canadian and maybe watching from other countries, you might not know this, but Canada's government right now under our beloved Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is very staunchly pro-immigration, and I have no issue with that particularly, but
me too.
It's just you can be staunchly pro-immigration, but some things still has to make sense, right? I think it's actually irresponsible to bring in a bunch of immigrants but have no plan on how to house them, and also if you bring in too many people, there is such a thing as bringing in too many people, right? I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't bring in anybody. I myself and my family are immigrants to Canada. Originally, I was born in China, actually. So, as I'm speaking as a first generation immigrant, that, as an immigrant, I would like to see Canada have the infrastructure and have the practical capacity to take care of immigrants, and not just kind of just abandon you once you land. Right. And I think this goes to show, I saw an interview with our deputy prime minister. So a deputy prime minister is kind of like the vice president, I guess, sort of equivalent. Our deputy prime minister, her name is Chrystia Freeland. And they interviewed Freeland and they asked her, should Canada adjust the immigration policy? And basically her response is no, our immigration policy is fine, and Canada has the social capacity to take care of the immigrants that we bring in. And I think that's just very tone deaf, because nobody's debating on whether a Canadian have the social capacity to take in immigrants, but social capacity does not put food on the table, right? We can be as welcoming and cheer for immigrants as much as we want, but that doesn't solve the housing crisis. That doesn't put food on the table. That doesn't guarantee them jobs once they get here. So I think the question that the government is not asking is, do we have the practical capacity to bring in immigrants? And this is just something that our current government just completely doesn't understand.
It's also the number of immigrants as well, because we've increased the number dramatically over the last few years, and the question is that the housing crisis has been getting worse. So why are we speeding up immigration at the same time that the cost of living and our housing market is getting completely unaffordable for everyone, including the immigrants who are immigrating here? So,
can I just add one more thing too? I'm very pro-immigration. We're all I am from an immigrant family that came to Canada. It's good to come here for opportunities, but when there's a floor front of us, it's hard to support everyone, right? So perhaps a pause and just slowing down the immigration process would be good for Canadians, just so we can catch up a bit more. And then sometime in the near future, these immigrants can come into our country just like everyone else and be treated as equals. Just want to say that so I don't get canceled. But yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, the fact that you're afraid of getting canceled just for saying that, just for saying something that, in my opinion, is very practical, just goes to show that the political discourse around this issue here in Canada is completely unhinged, and it's a shame. I don't know how else to describe it.
It's amusing because I'm also from an immigrant family, so
Yeah, like, and that's the thing, right? A lot of people think that like just because you're white, like you have no like right to speak on the immigration issue. It's like, white people can be immigrants too. Did you know that, right? Like I don't think like people don't really understand that, and that's part of the problem, right? And it's like, technically we're all immigrants at some point unless you're native, right? So yeah.
That's true. Yep.
So
Okay. Yeah. Anyways.
yes. Either way, I think in the long run, I think all of us are long run pro immigration.
Exactly. Yes.
Short run, we're very much like, how do we get out of this problem? And the only way you get out of a problem where you have too little supply and too much demand is to either increase the supply, or decrease the demand, or do both.
Mm-hmm.
And since we can't increase the supply fast enough, we have to lower the demand somewhat, And the only place that like we can functionally do that would be through the immigration rate, because we're not going to like implement a one-child policy, and we're not going to,
genocide our own people.
Just kick people out. So, what are you going to do?
Makes sense. All right. Okay. So everything is fucked.
By the way, we didn't really talk about the weather. Joking. I don't think that's relevant right now.
So the weather was like kind of an intro to this topic, and actually, I think now is a good time to move on to the second part of what I wanted to like intro with talking about the weather, and this one does have to do with the cold weather, and the surrounding EVs, right? Electric vehicles. So I saw a Twitter post or X post or whatever it's called now, where this guy from Saskatoon wanted to drive from Saskatoon is a city in Saskatchewan, Canada, for those of you who don't know Canadian geography. But this guy, he wanted to drive from Saskatoon to Kelowna, which is in British Columbia, which is another province here in Canada. And just to give you an idea of how long that is, I think it's about like a 13-hour drive normally if there's no traffic. And it's about 1,200 kilometers, or for our American friends who like to use freedom units, that is 745 miles. So he wanted to do this 745-mile trip. And the bad thing is he decided to do this in negative 40-degree weather during a winter storm. And he was in a Tesla Model 3 or a Model Y. I don't remember. I think it was a Model 3, but I could be mistaken. But anyways, so he says that the whole journey took him 3 times as long as what it would have been if he had been in a gas vehicle. And he spent over 100 Canadian dollars on the superchargings, like for all the superchargers that he had to stop on the way. And his car's range also went down to 280 kilometers, which again in freedom units is 173 miles. So his range was vastly reduced because I think the normal range for a Tesla Model 3, even the standard range one, is well over 400 kilometers that you're supposed to get, but went down to 280 for him in this particular instance. So this sparked a debate on Twitter where a lot of people were saying, EVs suck. This is why you don't drive EVs, especially here in Canada, where it can get cold. But I have some opinions that I wanted to kind of rebut to that, because I'm a big fan of EVs. But I wanted to get you guys' take on this first before I go on my spiel.
I'm pretty down to start. I think it has a lot to do with the geography. Like, let's think about it here for a sec. So Saskatoon to Kelowna, you're passing by Alberta, and the vast majority of Alberta is an oil city. So the likelihood of you seeing any EV charging stations are less likely than you would in Toronto and Vancouver. I guess it depends on the province. So since Alberta's pro-oil, makes sense. Gas is cheaper. which I like, by the way, every time I fill up. But it may not be the best if you're an EV driver. I've been living in Calgary for a few months now. I don't see as much Teslas, I'll be honest with you, versus back in Toronto. There's twice as many charging stations and twice as many Teslas at home in Ontario versus being here in Calgary. So it could be early for EVs. I could see why people don't like them quite yet. But if the infrastructure is developed, maybe in the future, EVs are pro and very good. But maybe it's too early. What do you guys think?
Mm-hmm. I think that when it comes to EVs in general, I think that there's definitely a major disadvantage on the road trip perspective because of that additional time spent having to charge. That takes a lot longer than just me walking up to a gas station and, 15 minutes later, not even, I'm on the road again, right? Which I think is pretty clear from the drive that he was doing that this was a, EV, not EV. This is a longer drive. It was clearly not like where EVs shine, which is kind of in that driving around your area that you live in. And I think that's why there's such a big disadvantage to them. And I would say that there's definitely a big disadvantage in really cold places for that battery range because of the cold reducing the range. So I'm not surprised that it took them a lot longer. So I think this is why I tend to lean towards the hybrid style of vehicle where you have gas and electric at the same time. So you can use the electric for your shorter area trips, like within a city or like within 100 kilometers or whatever, and then use gas for the rest. Because I think that makes those make a lot more sense for the longer trips like this.
To add on too, yeah, I guess I agree with you, Tristan. In a perfect world, I'm not really a materialistic person. I'd probably be okay with the Toyota Prius, and then I'll just call it a day. I think as of right now in 2024, the best thing you truly can do, hybrid driving. So
yeah, so I guess I have maybe a slightly different opinion on this, where I think this like whole thing with this story is completely overblown because I think if you're gonna drive from Saskatoon to Kelowna in negative 40-degree weather, even if you were in a gas vehicle, like you're gonna have a bad time. You know that like South Park meme is like you're gonna have a bad time, right? So it would have been a difficult drive, regardless of whether you were in an EV or a gas car. And I acknowledge that in this case, a gas car probably would have fared a lot better in this particular instance. However, it's not every day that Calgary or just like Western Canada gets such a big winter storm, right? So like you guys actually live in Calgary, so you guys can tell me, how often does it get to negative 40 degrees? It's not very often, right?
From my experience, I've been here a couple of years, so I'll go first because I know I've been here for the longest. We pretty much get one pretty cold spell for like about a week-ish a year, it seemed, or at least maybe last year was really warm, but last year we had like one cold spell in December, and then this year we had that cold spell. Who knows? Maybe we'll get another, but the last year's one also was not as cold. It was like minus 27, I think, was the lowest. But I was actually not here. I was just looking at the weather for that cold section. I dodged it, but it's usually when we get cold, it's usually not to the minus 40, right? It's usually a lot like minus 20 is like the kind of area that I feel like I've seen more commonly.
Yeah. So that's goes to show my point, right? I think that like arguing that ICE internal combustion vehicles are better, just because out of 1 week in 1 year, you might have something that is -40, and it will decrease your range by quite significantly. And also, I say quite significantly, but you still have 280 kilometers, which is again 173 miles in American units. That's still more than what a typical person would drive in a day, right? So unless you just so happens to go on a road trip on that one particular week out of one particular year where it's particularly cold, then this kind of story doesn't apply, right? And also, the thing with the supercharging, it's that again, it's that one particular circumstance where it is a lot more expensive if you use the supercharging station versus if you charge at home, because the supercharging stations are designed to get you from 0 to 80% as soon as possible, right? So you like ideally within like 45 minutes, but probably even less under normal circumstances. But as a result, it's going to put one, more wear and tear on your battery, and number two, it's also going to be more expensive. So it's not going to cost you anywhere near $100 to charge your vehicle like 2 or 3 times if you're just charging at home. But in this particular circumstance, this person was on the road, so he couldn't charge at home. He had to use the supercharging stations. And yeah, unfortunately, it is going to be more expensive for him for that one particular instance. But if you look at how much money he's saving on charging throughout the whole year compared to what he would spend on gas, then I think you'll see a great, like a big savings on top of that. Right?
Honestly,
sure,
$100 isn't even that expensive. I'm not gonna lie. Like a gas car would probably have cost you like 60 to $80 anyway. Probably, depending on how large the vehicle is, you could be over $100 with a gas car for that distance. So I don't even think the dollar amount is particularly offensive to me. I would say it's more the time spent that I would be more frustrated with as a user of the vehicle. I'd be like, gotta stop every like 2 hours. What the heck?
I mean, just don't go on a 1,200 kilometer road trip when it's like -40 or -50 degrees outside. Like, I think that like usually, I don't know, maybe this person, I don't want to sound insensitive. Maybe this person had a particular reason. Maybe his grandmother's dying and he needs to like drive to the hospital one last time to see her. But I don't know, right? Like, I don't know the story behind this, but in general, it's advised when you should check the weather report before you go on a long road trip. And if it's, -40 degrees, even if you're in a gas vehicle, it might be advised that you reschedule your trip, right? So I think there was some issue with planning, unless it's an emergency, which I don't know. But yeah, that's my opinion.
To be fair, sorry, you can go ahead.
No, go ahead real quick. Yeah,
okay. Well, to be fair, I was just gonna say, to be fair, a gas car would not have suffered as much as his car did, the Tesla.
True.
No, but like you still have to drive through like blowing snow. You still have to drive through like
I mean,
it's not just the cold, right? It's like whiteout conditions as well on some parts.
It could just be the cold. It could just be the cold. It was not like, it wasn't. I drove to the mountains in the cold, and the drive was not that bad. So I'm just like, the road conditions were not that bad. I'll say that. So,
like to add to, like, even then, so I went on a trip to Los Angeles sometime in May of 2023, and we were deciding on whether or not we wanted to try out like renting an EV car versus a gas powered car. And we decided to get the gas powered car just because of the time convenience. I feel like although Tesla supercharging stations are super duper quote unquote fast, I don't think they're fast enough versus what Tristan was saying. You just put in the gas and then you just head on your way, like less than 15 minutes. So yeah, to add on one more time, I think it's just a bit too early. Hybrid is the mode, I guess.
I think it's a bit circumstantial still, right? Because like if you can actually get 450 kilometers of range, which is 300 something miles of range, I think that's like good enough where yes, you do need to charge for maybe like 30 to 40 minutes if you like once you hit close to zero. But I think at that point, like you would want to stop to just grab a coffee or pee or something, right? So to me, it's
True.
not like a huge deal, but I guess yeah, like in this particular circumstance, if there's a winter storm and it gets cold and it gets reduced to like 200 something kilometers, and you just so happen to be on a road trip, it definitely could be an issue, and I could definitely see why you'd want a hybrid or a gas car in that case. But yeah, I think I still think EVs are the way to go for the future, but yeah, that's just my own biased opinion.
I'll just jump in here and say that if I was driving this the way I drove out here to move to Calgary, that would be 2 stops, 1,200 kilometers. That'd be 2 stops. That'd be 1 stop for gas, 1 stop in Kelowna. Just saying.
Yeah, because like how many kilometers can you get with like 1 go, right, before you have to fill out?
Our car does 800.
Wow, that's nuts.
Yeah, on a full tank. With on average. But you know, it'll vary depending on what we're driving up and down. It gets quite good mileage. But I can definitely do. We usually would do around 600 per fill up because of just wanting to have that buffer space. So I'm just saying, like, if I was driving the Tesla, I'd have had to stop at least 2 times on that trek.
Mm-hmm.
That would add up an extra hour, and I'd be salty about it.
Well, so yeah, slightly less convenient, but under normal circumstances, you would also save money because electricity. Under normal circumstances, supercharging would be cheaper than gas. I think somebody did like a calculation, and it's like a fifth or a quarter of the price to gas. I mean, it's circumstantial. It depends on where you are specifically, but in general, you can expect like a 75% savings ish if you use the superchargers as opposed to filling up. But yeah, anyways, I think that's good on that topic, unless you guys have more to add.
I'm okay.
All right, I'm good. I just want to say I agree with Dominic on the it's early. You know,
It's
it
too
is.
early.
if they can get that range up a little bit more, I feel like that would make it a lot better. You know,
to decrease the amount of frequency that you have to charge.
Exactly.
And, like, I guess sometimes like it's okay to get that cup of coffee or like, you know, stretch or something if you're on a road trip. But if you had to do that way too many frequent times, I feel like it would be a little too inconvenient, especially if, like, for my example in LA, if I had to rent a car and I had to charge it multiple amounts of times, that's like jeopardizing the amount of time that I have for that trip. And that can not be good. So it might be early.
So what you're saying is that it's still a good time to buy Tesla stock.
Maybe only if you think they can get that up.
I mean, to be frank, I'm like a stock owner, but besides the point.
Yeah,
they gotta get those numbers up, man. You know, like 400 is not good enough. You know, I did a road trip in September, and like if I was having to stop every 400 kilometers, we would have had to just tack on another day or so.
Honestly,
yeah, it would have added up. We drove over I think 5,000 kilometers. You add on a 30-minute stop every 400 kilometers. It's gonna be like a full extra day, right. Assuming that there's still stops, because we were in national parks. So assuming there were Tesla chargers, like the superchargers, you know
what? True though, yeah. Like, since we're like close to Banff, like you don't see them too often,
yeah. Well, we went down to Yellowstone, so, and then all the way to the Grand Canyon, so, you know, through the national parks. So I'm not sure if there's one in Yellowstone, for instance. I don't know if there's one in Grand Tetons. So that would be a problem.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Anyways, let's move on to the next topic, which is HUD 8. I think all of us are slightly biased because all of us have at least some shares of HUD 8. Among other miners as well, but the BTC mining space is a very cutthroat business sometimes. And Hut 8's one of the, I think they're one of the biggest Bitcoin mining companies out there. They just had a short attack, meaning that there was another company called J Capital, which put out this short report on how Hut 8 they did this merger with this other company called USBTC, and the short report mainly I think focused on USBTC and basically accused the insiders of orchestrating pump and dumps and saying how the insiders of USBTC were just like really sketchy and there were like undisclosed shareholder interests, just a bunch of accusations. The report is long and I did not read it word for word, but I did kind of skim through it. But yeah, this report kind of scared a lot of people. And as a result, the day that the short report came out, I think it was last Thursday, this stock dropped over 20%, 23%. Granted, it was on a day where I think all the miners were dropping, but Hut 8 in particular was hit hard because they had this short report plus the general negative sentiment around Bitcoin miners after the ETF approval, which caused Bitcoin to kind of drop because people kind of viewed it as a sell the news event. But yeah, I mean, in particular, this kind of news is concerning, especially because Hut 8 has not, as of recording this video, published a response to this short report yet. So people are kind of speculating. So I was just wondering, did you guys read the short report, at least skim through it? And if you did, do you find it to be valid or are you concerned? Or do you think this is just, kind of a short attack with no basis and you're buying more shares? Or kind of what are your thoughts? And by the way, none of this is financial advice, just a disclaimer. So please do your own research and do not use anything that you hear on this podcast as investment advice. We're not telling you to buy or sell anything. We're not telling you to like hold it, even like we're not telling you any financial advice. So this is just purely our opinions. But yeah, anyways, as Hut 8 shareholders, are you guys concerned? What do you guys think about the short report?
Can I chime in first?
Yes.
To be frank, I didn't read it, but I do have common sense. Let me keep going.
Too long, didn't read.
Did not look at it at all.
That's the best way to deal with investor
Not even gonna hide
short
it.
reports. You just don't read the report.
But like, think about it for a sec. Even if I didn't read it, I'm just gonna use like straight up common sense here. So right now, interest rates are all-time highs. Obviously, it's really, really expensive to borrow money. But in the case that JPAL eventually lowers it, whether it be in the summer or fall, money is going to be a lot cheaper to borrow. And if that's the case, I guess there's a lot of people who are pro Bitcoin, and inevitably they'll buy more Bitcoin. It could be used as a currency to transact, or people just want to use it as an asset to increase the amount of money that they have. 100%. I'm sure people will continue to buy or mine Bitcoin in the future. So with that being said, I think in the long term, just continue to buy it, dollar cost average into Bitcoin, Ethereum. Not financial advice, but that's something I would do. No more than 5%. I'm very pro miner too, because if they're correlated to Bitcoin, eventually in like 5 years, Bitcoin will drastically grow. So it's better to be a part of it instead of not being a part of it at all. So
Tristan, before you go, let me just present a potential rebuttal that some people might have against what Dom just said, right? So the kind of concern here is that, like, yes, I think we're all pretty convinced that Bitcoin will go up over the long term. Maybe some of our audience members aren't, but that's a topic for another day. But let's just say you're bullish on Bitcoin. You can be bullish on Bitcoin, but bearish on a particular Bitcoin miner too, because the catch is that, yes, Bitcoin will go up, but if you're not kind of operating a good business as a miner, the miner might still go bankrupt and you might still lose money, right? So I think this is what people are concerned about with this short attack on Hut 8, is that, like, if Hut 8 goes bankrupt, because of like, concerns around insider trading and all this stuff that they're being accused of, then if you're a HUD 8 shareholder, then you would still lose money even though that Bitcoin itself goes up, right? So it's kind of like with investing in a miner, you're taking on counterparty risk, as opposed to Bitcoin, where I mean, like if you're holding Bitcoin with self custody, then you don't take on counterparty risk, right? But yeah, like what do you think of that, Dom? Like, do you think that like HUD 8 in particular, do you have concerns over, or do you just kind of not care and just close your eyes and just buy?
To be honest, it's more of the second one. I don't have more than 5% of my total net worth inside of HUD 8 particularly. I think you're losing a lot of opportunity if you don't just YOLO, especially since we're all in our 20s. You may as well just put some part of your money inside HUD 8. And if the worst of the worst happens, let's say they go bankrupt and then the stock goes to zero, okay, I'll lose like less than 5% of my net portfolio, and I'm not going to cry about it because I was willing to lose it. So I think it's fine. But on the flip side, if it does really well, then sweet deal. It does well. So that's my stance on it.
Fair enough. So you're just kind of like taking a small speculative position and you're okay, like, even if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, because like I'm willing to lose this money. I think it's fine. I'm not saying I have a lot of FU money, but I think this is money I'm really willing to risk, so to speak. So it's fine.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Tristan, what are your thoughts? Because I think you have a slightly bigger position in HUD 8 compared
you too.
Just a little bit. Well, I must confess, I did look at the document. I'm not sure I consumed every bit of the data, but I also looked at the pre-merger documents for USBTC when HUD 8 and USBTC were announcing the merger, and I'll say that I sold my position prior to the merger because I didn't like USBTC's numbers. Well, I think the difference is now is that post the merger, HUD 8 has already been brutalized in terms of stock price at this point. So it's difficult for me to see a situation in which they don't perform better than they currently have been because of the fact that they have such a large hodl of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and the company itself is being valued very, very minimalist, very like minimally compared to the compared if you take into account their hodl, which means
the price to book is what you're hinting at, right?
Yeah. So to me, it looks like I mean, I could see the stock price being considered inflated, when it was at $28, but when it was at like 11 or 12, I think when they posted the report,
you're talking the Canadian dollar version.
Sorry,
right?
the Canadian dollar version. Yes, I always think of the Canadian dollar version. But when they were at that price range for the Canadian dollar version, I'm looking at it going, how much further can this fall? Like,
I remember that.
I'm like looking at it, I'm like, you're saying it's going to be, they're saying stuff like it's going to be a pump and dump and that they acquired a lot of debt, which they did. But I'm looking at it going, okay, they have enough to cover the debt. And in terms of hash rate, they're at a similar number to Bitfarms, and maybe they'll dilute. All the miners seem to be looking like they might dilute. So I'm not really seeing the real the issue that they're announcing like a flaming, shooting like a flaming gun or whatever, a smoking gun. I'm just not quite seeing.
Yeah, like you're not seeing like one particular thing that is like a death knell for the entire company immediately.
Yeah, because like to me, HUD 8 is like like a $400 million stock with a $600 million or $500 million Canadian, sorry, to be clear, Canadian, $500 million hodl. Well, their hodl's still worth $500 million. The stock is worth 400. The Hut 8 itself without USBTC. So USBTC can't be like, I don't think it's worth zero. So
yeah, just to clarify for our audience, the HODL is their Bitcoin that they're holding on their balance sheet, and I think the latest data that we got was just under 9,200, so 9,200 Bitcoin that they're holding right now. So that is quite substantial, considering that Bitcoin is at around 41,000 or just over 41,000 US dollars per Bitcoin at the time that we're recording this. So so I think maybe now's a good time for me to say my opinion, and I just want to say I agree with pretty much everything you said there, Tristan. And another thing that I want to point maybe our attention to is kind of maybe the motivation of J Capital, right? So we've had a bunch of short reports from them already, and I think they went after Marathon in the past, accusing Marathon Digital, which is another Bitcoin miner, of shady practices, and Marathon stock has done nothing but go up since they put up that short report, although it did go down immediately after they put out that short report, right? So this is what I'm saying, where the credibility of these short sellers is very questionable, because they even admit themselves, like, hey, we shorted the stock, we have a short bias, and we will make money if the stock goes down. And they did make money, right? Because they put out this short report, the stock goes down 23%, I think it was, on the day. They made a bunch of money immediately, right? So it's kind of like it's kind of like a cheat code, right? Where, like, if you're a short seller, you just put out this short report. And honestly, like, I didn't read the short report word for word, but I think the short report could have been a lot shorter than what they put out, because, like, no pun intended, but like, they put out like a 40 something page short report when it could have literally been 4 pages, because I think at one point they went through like 2 full pages talking about how, like, USBTC hired a 13-year-old as a chief meme officer, and that's like how.
Wait, did you say meme officer?
Yeah, like, well, you didn't read the report, right?
No, I didn't. Oh, my bad.
So they put out a 2-page or 2 pages out of the 40 something page report was about this 13-year-old kid who was hired by USBTC, apparently, allegedly. This it's all allegations, and none of this is proven, by the way. But the allegations are that USBTC hired this 13-year-old kid to be the chief meme officer of the company, and how this was evidence that the management is completely not serious and completely just, sketchy and scammy, that they would hire, a 13-year-old. So I think maybe this happened, maybe it didn't, but even if it did happen, like, I think everybody kind of knows that this would be kind of like a joke, right? Like, I don't think the management was really expecting the 13-year-old to really do anything substantial for the company. Maybe they just paid him, like, minimum wage, like $10 an hour. And it's like, here, make some memes that we'll post on our social media accounts. Like, I don't really see anything wrong with that, right? And they spent like 2 whole pages talking about that, which I think is just kind of grasping at straws. And I also think that, like, okay, even if what they said about, like, USBTC is true, after the merger, a lot of the, like, senior management came from the old Hut, and like the CEO and the chief investor relations officer, the CEO, Jamie Leverton, and Sue Innes, they're still kind of the ones at the helm, and they came from old Huts and not from USBTC. So I think this report, although, like, there are some things that might be slightly concerning, I'm not seeing, like, anything that would cause the company to, like, go bankrupt immediately or anything like that, right? So, and I think that it was overdone, that they went down 23% on a day when other miners went down less than 10%, just because of this report. So anyways, that's my opinion. Again, not financial advice, but I did add slightly to my hut 8 position on the day that this report came out. And I'm not gonna like, bet the farm on it or anything, but I think that on the rebound, once the sentiment in Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners kind of reverses, which I think it will, then I think hut 8 will be valued a little bit more highly because they came from a lower spot in the beginning, right? And again, they still have their 9200 BTC hodl. And actually, one last thing before I pass it back to you guys. I think at one point on the report they mentioned that hut 8 is not going to be profitable mining Bitcoin until Bitcoin hits 60 some odd $1,000 per coin, which I'm not sure where they pulled that number from, because sounds like they just made that up because they said according to our analysis, but their analysis was just like, look, hut 8 is one of the least efficient miners in terms of BTC mined per hash, which is true. But I would argue that was because they were focusing on the merger and they weren't focusing on optimizing their business operations while they were trying to get the merger done. But even if that's true, I don't think that that number just sounds wrong to me. I don't know where they came up with the analysis that they're not going to be profitable until Bitcoin hits 60K. But I've seen miners put out their, I haven't seen one for hut, but I've seen other miners put out their profitability per Bitcoin, and miners that are only slightly more efficient than hut 8 are saying that their break even is around 20,000 or 21,000. So if hut 8 is slightly less efficient, let's say their break even is around 25 or 30,000, that still makes them profitable at today's prices of Bitcoin of around 41,000. So that's just that number just seemed wrong where they said 60K, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me pass it to you guys now.
I don't know. I'm pretty speechless about it. You can go.
I just want to say that I'm pretty sure TerraWolf has, for example, has put out its numbers for how efficient it is, and it is according to their numbers, aka Jake Capital's numbers. It is at 65, whatever that means, 65 on there. Maybe like 67 is the efficiency, where hut is at 63. It looks like they don't actually have it specified. Wolf was saying that it cost them 23,000 when I last checked a couple months ago. And if it's 23,000 for Wolf, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be. And we go down, for efficiency, whatever's. I'm pretty sure it's not going to add on 37,000. In terms of a cost per coin. That just doesn't pass the BS. Whatever.
Yeah, so, it's like it rings your BS detector.
Yeah,
right? So, yeah. I mean, that again, to me, that number just seems absolutely wrong, and I don't know where their analysis, how their analysis landed them at 60K as the break even point. But I mean, they did argue that they factor in how hut 8 took on some debt. So I think at one point they mentioned that hut 8 was paying somewhere in the low teen percentages of interest rates of the debt that they inherited from USBTC, which it isn't ideal. But again, we have to keep in mind that interest rates have gone up in general, and it's not uncommon these days to have business loans or business debt that are in the low teen percentages of interest rates, as long as it's not something ridiculous 20 or 30%, which I think the highest one I saw was 14 point something percent that hut 8 has, which again, it's not ideal, but it's I don't see it being absolutely crushing, right? And I think if Bitcoin can turn up towards the halving, which is scheduled for sometime in April, I think that that'll be super easy for Hut 8 to pay that off if they wanted to.
Well, I think it's very difficult to look at Hut 8 and somehow draw the conclusion that they're a bankruptcy risk. I think that's a big factor for me as well, because how do you look at a company that has 500 million in Bitcoin on its balance sheet and just go, they're gonna go bankrupt when their debts are, if I recall correctly, under 100 million. I think it's like 80 something, 80, 90. Okay, yes, they have, that's a lot of debt for the company, but they have 5 times the amount of debt, like 5 times the amount of the debt in their Bitcoin total. So I just don't understand how the conclusion is that they're at risk of bankruptcy. I feel like there are a lot of other miners that are much more closer to towing that line. And I feel like this is basically just, they went and J Capital looked at USBTC, was like, this is kind of a shit deal, and then decided to run with it. And to me, I'm like, yeah, it wasn't the best deal, but they've already lost so much value at this point. They don't have much further to go.
Yeah, and also somebody looked into the history of J Capital. Besides the marathon short that they did, their like most frequent, I guess, bread and butter for shorting are like sketchy Chinese companies, which we all know are sketchy. So like it's not exactly hard to say that a sketchy company is sketchy. So they've been going after like all these low hanging fruits, and as a result, they have a really high rating because it looks like they've been right so many times, and they have been right so many times, but that's only because they go after all the easy targets. That's why they're right? It's like, it's like trying to claim that you're a math genius, but all you do is you do like 3rd grade math tests. It's like, yeah, of course you're going to get 100% on every test, but that doesn't make you a genius, right? So
it's also like the fact that they're targeting smaller cap stocks. I feel like that is part of that, is that they think that they can move the stock downward and therefore make that money really easily. I think that's a big part of it. Okay, because if you tried to do this on Apple, and Apple would just be like, who cares? Everyone who's read the short report probably moves Apple down $1 billion, and then oh my gosh, that was like 1/3%, whereas like Hut 8, they're small enough that they moved it down like $200 million or so in terms of value, because they can, people.
Yeah,
I don't think a lot of shareholders for Hut are sitting there like actually super duper like Hut is the next whatever, so they see something that scares them, they just get out.
Yeah, and especially because like the Bitcoin mining space is very competitive, so it's not like Hut or nothing. Like you could sell Hut and go into another miner really easily. So it's like, to some people, they're like, okay, well, I don't know if this report is true or not. And I've seen a lot of this on Twitter actually, where people are like, I don't care if this short report is true or not. I'm just going to sell it and put my money into another miner just because I have so much choice, not because I believe the short report is real. Right? So yeah, I mean, that's kind of unfortunate, because I think long term is going to be a mistake, because if this report does turn out to be a nothing burger, I think you're going to see Hut kind of catch back up to other miners, and then they're going to sell something at the bottom and then buy something that doesn't rebound as much. But that's just my opinion. Don't invest based on what I just said. But
I don't think it's a complete nothing burger. I think it's just like this little like baby burger, and like a very, and like one of those little gummy burgers. I think it's like that. It's not like you've gone into McDonald's and stacked 5 Big Macs to find the world's next biggest fraud. It's like, okay, yeah, you got there is a little bit of truth to this, enough that there's a little burger, but it's not sufficient that, I think that it's worth losing a lot of sleep over.
It could have been a 4-page report and not a 40-page report. That's my point.
Yeah, like I think the big thing is the USBTC wasn't a great deal, and I mean I think that's true. I think that it wasn't a great deal for Hut 8 particularly, but again, at this point, the ship has sailed, and the new Hut is valued such that it is not unreasonable the amount of stuff they gained from it, even if they overpaid for it.
Mm-hmm. Dom, you have anything to add, or should we move on?
We should just move on.
All right. Okay, so next up we have the December CPI came out last week, and it was hotter than expected. So the actual number was 3.4% year over year, and the expected was 3.1%. And I think the previous month, so this was for December 2023 for the United States. For November, I think it was also 3.1%. So it did tick up quite a bit on this December report. So this scared a lot of people, and as a result, the Fed Watch tool, which is the CME Watch tool, which is like what I go to check what are the percentage probabilities of rate cuts in the future. So it's saying that there's pretty much no chance of a Fed rate cut in January, which is the next FOMC meeting coming up. And for the one in March, before this report came out, I think it was at 70-something% of a rate cut starting in March. And now basically it's 50-50. So it's just a coin flip on whether rate cuts will happen in March or if it's going to get delayed to May, which is the next one after that. There's no FOMC meeting in April for some reason. But anyways, so what do you guys think? I know here in Canada, we just posted our CPI for December, and it was also 3.4%. And it was, I think in Canada, it was actually in line with expectations. So analysts were actually expecting 3.4%, but it still represents a tick up from November. So it looks like in December, inflation in both the United States and Canada ticked up noticeably. Part of it was driven by gas costs, but part of it was also driven by the price of, I think food was one of them. But did you guys notice that prices have gone up for you guys? And what do you think? How do you think this affects the chances of rate cuts, both in Canada and the United States? And how does this affect stonks in general?
You see the price of olive oil these days?
I know it's so expensive. It's nuts.
Yeah, no, I went to No Frills, which is a grocery chain here in Canada. It's owned by this big conglomerate called Loblaws, which everybody loves to hate and hates to love, I guess. here in Canada, No Frills. So there was two kinds of like the high quality ones. So there was the no name ones, which were still under $10 Canadian per bottle, but I'm not exactly convinced that those are real olive oil because I don't know, like the color is like a lot lighter than what olive oil should be, and I think it's probably like cut with like canola or something. But if you want the actual like good olive oil, the like Greek ones were like $16.99, so $17 for the Greek olive oil. And there was one that was certified from Kalamata, which is this like species or this region in Greece that had the stamp on it, and the stamped one was $19, so $18.99 per bottle, and the bottle was 750 milliliters. So it's not even a liter, and it's almost $20. So yeah, it's gone quite insanely expensive in Canada. So yeah, I was wondering what you guys think of it. Have you guys seen food inflation speed up once again? And if so, how do you think this affects the economy?
I mean, like day to day, like when you're buying groceries and such. I used to live in Ontario with my parents, but now I moved over here. Life is pretty expensive, I'd say. Buying your everyday necessities are pretty pricey. Let's just say that, whether it be like bread, eggs. I'm definitely noticing the difference for sure. But Andy, I actually wanted to ask you, when do you think the next projected rate cut will happen then? Like according to like how you feel and like what you think.
In Canada or in the US?
How about we'll just say both?
Okay, so in the US, I want to say that the first rate cut will happen in March, still, because yeah, finger crossed.
Please.
Yeah. So I think the reason for that is because if you look at Trueflation, so I'm not sure if you guys have been on Trueflation. If not, you can like search it up right now, trueflation.com. It's like an independent organization that measures inflation in the United States. And according to their numbers, the true inflation rate in the United States is already under 2%. So I think it was 1.85 or something last time I checked. So, you know, I think I want to say it's my opinion, but I think it's actually a fact. But I'll just say it's my opinion for now. But it is my opinion that trueflation precedes CPI inflation, right? So if you look at the trend of trueflation, it's been plummeting like crazy, right? And the CPI is low, so it doesn't capture that. But I think in the subsequent months, you will capture it. And I think December was kind of a fluke because it was the holiday season, and you know, as we come out of COVID, I think you're going to have people kind of consumer confident kind of increase, and also I think the stock market was doing well in December, so that kind of wealth effect, even if you don't sell your stocks, just seeing that number go up in your account is kind of going to prompt you to spend more money, I think, right? And it's called the wealth effect. So I think that had a big part to do with it. Whereas if you look at December of 2022, like the stock market was kind of in the dumps, right? So like the wealth effect, it was kind of a reverse wealth effect back in December of 22. So year over year, if you compare December 2023 to 2022, you're probably going to see a big increase, and I think that shouldn't be surprising. But going forward, I think you're going to see inflation kind of tick back down again. And you're going to see jobless claims and unemployment go up. And I think that that's going to really kind of prompt the Fed to start rate cuts. So I still think that the first rate cut starts in March for the Fed in the United States. For Canada, I think it's going to come later. So not March, but probably in the summer. So like June or somewhere in that area. Just because I think that the Bank of Canada is really wary about capital flight to the United States, right? So if they start cutting rates before the Fed does, or even at the same time, that's going to prompt people to kind of flee the Canadian market and put their money into the US market. Because if they start cutting, the US is staying flat, then the US dollar is going to go up against the Canadian dollar. And that's what they don't want. So they're not going to cut before the US does. And preferably, they want to wait until the US starts cutting, and they want to wait like, you know, a few months or maybe even a few quarters before they start cutting. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think?
I'm speechless. Yeah, that sounded just about right. How do you like top that one off? Yeah, it's good to know. I didn't know that like there'd be such a difference between the States and Canada, but it kind of makes sense too, from your explanations. Yeah, that's why I want to ask you specifically, because I think you're most knowledgeable in that regard. So I don't know if Tristan has anything else to pinpoint into.
Yeah, I think that inflation has been definitely higher than what they've been claiming it's been. I'll say that. So the rate that everything seems to be increasing has been, you know, they say it's 5% or whatever, and then it really, or like 3% in this case, but it really feels like it's going up a lot faster than that. It's definitely been coming down from what I can tell. So, I think that's fair, but I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I think that there's still plenty of time for our dollar to get eroded more.
So here's a question for y'all. If you were the Fed, would you cut rates in March or keep rates steady? And by cut rates, I mean just a 25 basis point cut.
Well, it depends on the next few CPI reports. Is that how that works too? Because if numbers are going really well, then it would be time to cut rates. Because
so that is how the Fed kind of operates. So they want to wait till the data kind of comes in. But let's just say that we don't get a super hot inflation that's above expectations again. But we get, let's say it goes down slightly, right? It goes from 3.4 back down to 3.1, and then maybe a month later it goes to 3.0. If the trend of downward CPI reports continue for the next 2 months, and again, we don't have that many CPI reports until March, right? I'm not sure if the February CPI will come out before the March meeting. I think it does, but we still have to get the January one. So at most, you're going to get 2 more reports, right? But assuming that in those 2 more reports, CPI inflation comes back down to 3.1 or less, if you were Jay Powell, would you cut rates?
Probably. If it's trending down, I feel like if it's trending down, at some point you have to decide to cut rates. I would say the fact that there was an upset.
But keep in mind the target of the Fed is 2%. So you don't think that they should wait till it hits 2% to cut, or you think that they should start cutting now?
I don't think that they can afford to wait till 2% to start cuts, because I think it will decrease in general, because of the higher rates. But even if they cut the rates by 25 basis points, it's still a high rate, right?
You're not scared of the Houthi rebels with their 1970s Soviet technology blocking the Red Sea?
I was gonna mention that. Wait, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong. So there was a time where interest rates were going super duper high in the 70s or 80s, right? And I think they started to cut a little too early, and because of that, it kind of messed up the entire economy. So you think Jay Powell is trying to not cut super duper early? So in that case, maybe he's not going to cut quite yet, and not until the summer, because he just wants to make sure everything's okay and not repeat history one more time.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. And for background, in case you guys don't know, and maybe our audience members wouldn't know this as well, but there's in the 70s and 80s, there's a tale of 2 Fed chairmen, and their names are Arthur Burns and Paul Volcker. So what Burns did was, he was kind of wishy-washy with, increasing rates and decreasing rates. And as a result, because he increased rates too slowly, and I think he also decreased rates too fast, inflation spiked up, and inflation became out of control. And then they got a new guy, Paul Volcker, the new chairman. And what Paul Volcker did was, I think he hiked rates up to I think it was 20%, 20 something percent at its highest. So just to give you guys an idea, we're at 5.25 to 5.5. It's the range, right? But yeah, we're at 5.5% right now on the maximum end. And Paul Volcker did 20 something percent. So that crushed inflation, but it also, crushed anyone who was trying to take out money for a mortgage or for a loan or anything like that, right? So, but it did manage to control inflation, and it crushed inflation. So I think the kind of debate right now is that Jay Powell, he's not a young man anymore, right? He's not going to live forever. He wants to leave a legacy as Fed chairman. And Jay Powell wants to be a Paul Volcker more than he wants to be Arthur Burns, because Burns was seen as a failure, versus Paul Volcker was like, the person that kind of came in and did what was necessary to fix the issues, right? So he wants to be remembered as a Volcker, not as a Burns. So
Can't go to 20%.
yeah. So unfortunately, the United States national debt is at 34 trillion as of making this video. So by the time you guys all watch this video, it might be like 35 or 36 trillion, because apparently it's going up by like a trillion every 6 to 8 months. But anyways, 34 trillion, if you do the math, if you have to pay 20% interest on that, that would just crush the entire economy in an instant. So unfortunately, Jay Powell cannot raise interest rates that much, but arguably he doesn't need to, right? Because he raised to 5.5, and already there are some industries that are getting crushed, and there are signs of recession popping up in various places. Although we're not arguably in a full-blown recession quite yet. But yeah, anyway, so it's kind of like a debate, right? So like, I am not jealous of Jay Powell's job at all, because I think it's actually a very difficult job. And if you make a mistake, you kind of ruin it for like not only Americans, which is like a large portion of the world's population at this point, but also for the world, right? Because whatever America does, everyone else tends to follow. And I always like have this joke where the Bank of Canada governor has the easiest job in the world, because all he does is copy Jay Powell's homework, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's just whatever America does, whatever the Fed does affect the entire world. So yeah, it's a difficult thing.
I mean, to add on to that too as well, America is currently like the leading currency of the entire world, so anything they do is probably really important, coming from me. And didn't that happen with the British Prime Minister? She tried to lower rates and it kind of messed up everything, and then they had to switch it over. What was the story again?
Yeah. So what happened with Liz Truss is the woman you're thinking of, and
Yeah, exactly.
her like premiership or prime ministership, however you say it, lasted shorter than a head of cabbage. Like, did you see that video where like somebody put a head of cabbage next to a picture of Liz Truss, and it's like, who will last longer, Liz Truss as prime minister or this head of cabbage? And the head of cabbage actually outlived her premiership. But yeah, anyway, so I think what happened in the UK was basically like she introduced a budget, and basically her premise was that we are a nation of entrepreneurs, and we're going to lower taxes, and stimulate the economy, and get people to like spend more money and like get the economy running, so that we can outgrow this inflation. The problem was, I don't remember what the official CPI of the UK was at that time, but I think I checked on Trueflation, and according to Trueflation, inflation in the UK was at 18% at the time when she introduced this plan. So it was not the best time, and I think what happened was the treasury bonds of the UK, they're called gilts, GILT. So the gilts market kind of just blew up, and then they were trying to do what's called quantitative tightening, QT, and what happened was, oh, Tristan just completely disappeared.
He has an invisible cloak. Yeah.
He was draped an invisible cloak over himself.
Oh
yeah.
God.
What happened was the gilts market completely just was not having it, because they were trying to do QT, which is quantitative tightening, which is when the Treasury, or their version of Treasury, whatever it's called in the UK, was trying to reduce the amount of bonds that they were holding by selling the bonds, which pulls liquidity out of the market, right? So this theoretically should help with inflation, because you're pulling money out of the market. But because like if you do QT too hard, or if something like this budget thing happened with Liz Truss, people don't want to buy these bonds anymore. So it causes the bond yields to go up, and yields are inversely related to price. So it causes the price to go down. And that is a huge issue if nobody wants to buy your bonds anymore. Yeah, basically the gilts market was not having it, and the Bank of England had to reverse course and do a round of QE instead of when they were just doing QT like the week before. So they just had to completely reverse course and do an emergency bond buying operation. And basically that was like kind of the market revolting against Liz Truss's plan. And that was bad enough that it took down her prime ministership in an instant. So yeah, not
Yeah.
good.
Not good. Definitely not good.
Yeah, so this is what happens when economics don't work in favor of like politics. Like it's just economics. It's a very complicated machine, right? Like no matter
Totally.
if you're in the UK or US or Canada, it's just the best not mess with it.
True.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyways, I think that's good for that topic. And on to our last topic of the day. We've been going for a while, so this is going to be our last thing on the docket. It's Apple Vision Pro. So I'm sure you guys have heard of it and know what it is. It's Apple's augmented reality headset, and pre-orders started this past Friday, I think it was. And the sales were drastically lower than expected, according to initial reports. So this is unverified at the moment, but according to Computer World, which is a tech publication, Apple's Vision Pro sales reportedly plummeted from 1 million to just 150,000 units.
Oh.
And the result or the cause of this was apparently just the price tag, right? It's too high.
It's
So
really
it's $3,500 US for the headset. And I think for certain applications, like the battery doesn't last very long. So you have to like kind of not go too far from a plug. And also there's rumors of competitors coming up soon, like Meta and LG, which are planning on releasing their own version of the reality headset for a drastically lower price. I think rumor has it that Meta will soon release a $200 reality headset, arguably with less features, but it's $200 versus $3,500. So basically a night and day difference. So I just wanted to get you guys' take on this. First of all, are you getting one? And why or why not? And second of all, how do you feel about VR versus AR as a product category? And do you think that the Apple Vision Pro will succeed, or will it just be kind of a footnote in history?
I can start.
Sure, go ahead.
It's way too expensive.
Extremely.
There's no way that it's going to get adopted. It is the cost of a used car. Like no one is going to buy this. The average person's not going to buy it.
So do you think that just because it's very expensive, do you think that this is kind of like a failure of this entire product category for Apple? Or do you think that if they were to refine this technology and come up with a cheaper one in the future, maybe they can like kind of save this game? Because the way I think about it is kind of maybe they're doing the Tesla model where, when the Tesla Roadster, the original Roadster came out, it was also very expensive and it was also very, shitty to put it frankly. Right. But look at Tesla's success now where they came up with newer models like the Model 3 and the Model Y, and it's gone pretty mass market, I would say. Right. So I think maybe you could argue that Apple's goal wasn't to create a product that will sell like hotcakes on day one. Maybe they just wanted to demonstrate what the technology was capable of. and then at a later point introduce kind of a mass market product, and then that's when they'll take over the market. But this is kind of getting people used to the technology.
It's basically a giant beta test is what I think it is. It's called, hey, we have a product. It's not that good, probably. I haven't watched videos on how good it is or not good it is, but like Meta's been doing this a lot longer. I would be very surprised if it is significantly better than Meta's offerings. Especially for the price tag. Like even if it is really good, I can equip my entire family and then my neighbor's family and then my neighbor's family with Quest 2s and still be under the budget of just one of this device, like, so it's basically, they're just trying to get they're trying to do a bigger beta test with all the people who want to be on the cutting edge of stuff and who are really like Apple's the best.
But there's gonna be like people who want this like no matter what though.
That's what I was saying. Like they're basically just getting the people who want to have Apple stuff and be like Apple's gonna be the best, So I think it's just basically a giant beta setting. And as Andy said, I think in the long run they will make something better and something that is more reasonably priced. But this is basically like a proof of concept. It's kind of like Oculus's early offerings, which were very expensive and not very good.
I mean, that's the way it is though. Like there'll be like this new innovative or invention technology that'll come out. It's gonna be really, I'll say it, shit, but then they're gonna work over it over a few versions, and then that's the version that most people should get. So I guess for those people who really want it and want to pay for that price point, they're targeting them. They're going to get the short end of the stick because it's going to be bad inevitably. And then the people who do want it later on, maybe they'll lower the prices and then they'll be good. But Apple has power anyways. I feel like people are going to get it no matter what. It's just the way it is.
It's just going to be made obsolete really quick for the price because Apple's going to release whatever there's version 2 of this like a year later, and it's going to probably be like 3 times better because of all the data they've got from this one.
100%.
So you're going to pay $3,500. They're probably going to come up with something that's like $1,500, and it's going to be 5 times better.
But people are going to buy the 3K one anyways. It's ridiculous, but it's really true.
So, but what do you guys think about the VR and AR as a product category? Do you think that there's a place in the future for products like these, if assuming that the price comes down and it's not $3,500, assuming that it's, I don't know, $1,000 or even cheaper? Do you think that, like, can you see yourself using one, and if so, for what purpose? Like, and do you think it's gonna eventually replace your phone or your home theater, or I don't know what kind of use case, or like your gaming console even, right? Like what kind of use case do you guys see yourself, if at all, using these products for?
I don't think I would use it quite yet, just because of how expensive it is. Like, I see no purpose to it.
Assuming it's cheaper, assuming that, like, you can get one for $500 or even less.
Maybe, perhaps, but I think society is kind of like a herd mentality. So, for example, everyone used to have Blackberries back in the day, and like people were like, smartphones, like, what is this? Like, why are we gonna need it? And then slowly, one by one, people started to get smartphones as time progressed. It's probably going to be the same way, but people are afraid of like technology changes, but I guess it might happen if it becomes popular enough. Then, yeah, I guess the VR world will, like, VR AR is the thing. Like, it'll eventually integrate, but too early to say, I guess.
I think, speaking as jumping in here, but speaking as someone who has been in VR, has had a VR headset since 2018. I've been in the space, like, using VR headsets for a while. I've used a couple, and they're not going to be replacing much of anything currently. Like, they're fun for their VR games, but VR has some very major problems, particularly with motion sickness, that I find very limiting for my use case, as well as that screen door effect is always really makes viewing like movies and stuff on it. You know, it's not the best. So I think that they need to figure that out, and they need to do it in a way that keeps the costs low. And I know Oculus's stuff, which is already not super cheap, because like they were 400 when I bought my Quest 2. I think 450, I think it was. And that thing still has the screen door effect. It's a lot better, but even with that, I wouldn't want to watch a movie on it. So it's not going to replace that. And you know, any game that's not a VR game, I'd rather play on anything else. So it's gonna have a tough time replacing anything until they get a lot better. And from the AR perspective, I can see there may be some utility with those somewhat, but I feel like with the size of the headsets currently, I wouldn't want to wear that thing all the time in order to get the probably like 5% benefit from it. So
yeah, and apparently it's also very heavy. That's like one of the chief complaints that people have when they tried it, like because they did some limited beta tests with like tech reviewers and stuff. I know MKBHD Marcus Brownlee, he went to go try it, and he's like, "This is great, but it's way too heavy."
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I know when I was playing whenever I play the Quest 2 a lot, I almost always stop either because I'm getting motion sick or my neck hurts. One of the two. It's a dice roll on which is going to give out first, my stomach or my neck. So, you know, at that weight, like they basically need to get them down to like a pair of like glasses or maybe a like ski goggles.
Yeah.
Right. Something like that light. And until they do that, no one's going to wear them because it's just going to be too uncomfortable.
Yeah, you know, I'd be interested in like going to a VR arcade or something if they have these for rent, just to try it out. Because like you guys know, I'm an Apple fanboy. I have like Apple everything. I'm using a MacBook to record this podcast right now. But yeah, this is not something that I would buy because again of the price. I think this goes for a lot of people. But other than the price is also like, yeah, I guess the use case for me is not exactly too clear. It's just kind of cool for me. So I mean, I'd be totally down to rent it from like an arcade just for like an hour or something, just to try it out. But yeah, apparently it like the reviews have been really great, other than the fact that it's $3,500 but and super heavy. But besides that, like people do say, you know, it works like magic. The eye tracking is like pretty insane, and like typing is pretty crazy because you can just look at a letter and then it'll like pop up and then it'll confirm in like another like fraction of a second. So like you can literally just type with your eyes, which is insane. But yeah, I mean it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting product. And I think the price is really the limiting factor. I don't think I think that if it was $400, I think a lot of people would be jumping out of the woods to buy it. But at this price, it's not going to fly off the shelves. And as I said, with the having VR, one thing I did mention is you need a lot of space to have a good time playing VR for most games, or else you hit things.
Yeah, we have a housing crisis here in Canada. We can't afford that.
We can't afford the headset, and then we can't afford the space for the headset. You know, like I punched over a TV once playing VR. So
oh gosh,
it survived. But I did Falcon punch it in the front and knock it over. So I'm just saying.
You did or you didn't?
I did. I hit it like I punched like this, and I hit the TV, and I had a beanbag chair behind it, and it fell and landed on the beanbag chair.
Oh, you got lucky.
Well, the beanbag chair was intentional, so I had put the beanbag chair with the possibility of it falling.
You foresaw the future.
So, and I, clearly I did not have enough space to be playing VR in that room. And I feel like that room was a pretty typical size for a bedroom. So, it's gonna be difficult to play a lot of VR games as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when a lot of them involve moving quickly and, oops, I'm punching at something. Oh, and I hit my TV, or I hit my monitor, or I hit my desk, and now my hand hurts. It's not really super ideal.
Yeah, the whole VR space could use a little bit more work. All right, so I think that's about it for today. So how about we wrap it up here, unless you guys have anything more you want to add?
I'm good. I could do like a little bit of an outro if you want, and then
Yeah,
you
no, we've been going for quite a bit, so let's
Yes.
wrap it up. And Dom, why don't you take it away?
Okay. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Zillennial Money Podcast. So Andy, Tristan, and myself have been wanting to do this for a while now, and since we do get along and chat quite a bit, obviously in a good way, about all things finance and etc., we thought we'd make this happen. So if you have a chance, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And by the way, subscribe to my personal channel too, Dominic Gong, and
Yeah, I'll put the links to all our personal channels down below in the description.
and I don't know which way you are up this, and if you want to plug into as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So again, my name's Andy. You guys might know me from Andy's Fire Club, which if you're not subscribed, you should. And the link for that is down below in the description. And yeah, that's it. Tristan.
Thanks for watching, guys. My name is Tristan, and subscribe to Tristan Tries.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll put some content out. Yeah, maybe I'll put some content out again.
All right. Very active on his channel. Don't worry.
So active.
He has content all the time. He's just kidding around with you guys. All right. So that's it for today. Thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time. Peace.
Peace out.